sexual is mercurial, the more that is integrated into the personality and self at all kinds of different levels, then you've got an actual facility at some
Right.
level with change work and
Yes.
not doing the
Yeah.
personality or the instincts and repeating.
And with like the heart chakra, there's that kind of element of that other people can impact me
Hmm.
and I can impact other people. And so the implications of that really do affect the heart in
Hmm.
general. And that's a very social kind of thing.
Right.
Like there's another thing here other than me to
The
consider.
big hormone Enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. Let you know that the man has got to deal with it.
I'm John Lekovich, 405, sexual self-pres, 458 trifix.
I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a social self-preservation 9-wing 1, 963 trifix.
Like and subscribe on Apple and Spotify, and leave us a review. If you want to support the show with a donation, you can find us on Venmo at Big Hormone and paypal.me/Big Hormone.
Well, I just was listening. I didn't get all the way through it. The second half of the conversation with John, that was interesting.
Yes. What did you think?
That was great. That thing he brought up, the Kunda buffer,
Yes.
that was fascinating.
Hmm.
And it's well, it's just always interesting to me how the the things that can be that I would associate at an archetypal level with the sexual instinct are always confoundingly, confounding, confusing, in terms of you can't say, you can't clearly say it's good or bad. And it's
Yeah.
in fact clearly often really good and really bad,
Hmm.
destructive or creative or procreative. And the same is, just like what comes up with uh, snakes and dragons, which I've associated with the sexual instinct.
Hmm.
There's, is the snake, the devil, or is the snake
Mm.
wisdom? And dragons are in stories, often a dark force, and sometimes they're an entity that you in the story, in the point of the story, I guess you ought to befriend the dragon. It's
Hmm.
sort of like the idea in the dream, I guess, of the thing that's been chasing you several nights in your dreams. You ought to turn around and talk to it,
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, also just that there's a destructive, let's say, satanic, demonic aspect of existence itself,
Hmm.
and um, well, on the other side of that, on the spirit side, that's the the non-satanic or whatever. It's, I mean, that's why it's like existence is a soul school or something like that.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Hmm. That's interesting. Did you hear the part when I talk about slaying the dragon
no,
and
I
that as
didn't
an
get. Was that
image?
towards the end? Because I don't think.
Maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah, because I didn't. I got, I think, two-thirds of the way ish.
Okay, maybe it
Yeah.
was closer to the end. I talked a little bit about like this one book that I'm reading, um, and it's a female Jungian, and she talks about like different images that have and like symbols that have been morphed throughout time to kind of like how do I describe it? It's kind of like, Pan was turned into the devil in Christianity. And so, like, what Pan represented, talk about like sexual instinct kind of stuff and just connection to instinct in general,
Right.
gets demonized.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what she's describing with the slaying of the dragon, that like that was so big in a lot of like, uh, what is it, the hero's journey?
Mhm.
And people have turned it into a concretized image. So like slaying the dragon becomes murder instead of like a transformation, like
Oh, okay.
death. There's always rebirth after death, and it's just become death instead of
Okay.
and then rebirth.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there has to be like some kind of sacrifice, and there isn't any sacrifice, so it just becomes straight up murder of the dragon. And then like this hero's journey kind of becomes more damaging than it is transformative for people, because it's so focused on kind of just like the individual's importance, and then the cutoff of instinct. So when you're bringing up the even just like the dragon and the snake thing, it kind of makes it, I didn't even think of tying it to like sexual instinct sort of thing, like just even the dragon being a symbol of that, or all three instincts,
Right,
like you've
right.
mentioned.
Yeah. What you're describing, one way to frame it, or an aspect of it, that sort of, let's say, wrong use of the dragon, whatever popular culture or whatever those stories were that were kind of not going in the most valuable direction. One way to say it is that it's the flaw of self-preservation instinct being predominant, and it's just making it, oh no, something's trying to kill us.
Yeah.
Kill it. Oh, we killed it. Good. Over. Now we will survive.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
which is just the most horrifying, dull crap, Self-preservation, social specifically, that's why a lot of movies are the way that they are. And, like war is shadow sexual instinct, penetration, ripping open flesh, the wetness of blood, and
That's interesting.
we're gonna just enter this country, invade, and pop the egg of the of the Death Star, right? with our legion of sperm cell fighters, right, or whatever.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that would be kind of too like Mars, God of War. Like it's very Martian in that way. And you always like I always wondered where like war is attributed to Mars, and there's like some kind of masculine element to that. Like Mars and Venus can't be separated. Like they are opposites, but they're also always together. So it's just like what then would be what you're saying, like the more the opposite of the shadow side, I guess.
Well, the opposite of the shadow side is Hermes, and Hermes is Mercury, if we're talking planets, right? Or
Okay.
whatever. So, because I mean, said it a lot probably, but like the reason, well, the word hermaphrodite is Hermes and Aphrodite. So Hermes is the one that can do androgyny.
Right.
Which is a symbol, of course, of integration, which would be the higher vibration of of that, which would include that higher vibration of self-preservation that you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, we solved that.
Yeah. On to the next
so we solved
major
war.
Affliction of mankind. Yeah.
Disease.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the chakras. I want you to tell me what you're thinking about that.
So for the listener,
I like this.
Looking at the 7 chakras, it's a classic whatever schema. And at the bottom, and the chakras all have elements associated with them, which then has the potential, of course, to bring in my elemental associations with the instincts. And then there's other things, like there's a lotus flower at each point, with a certain number of petals that symbolizes something, and there's colors and so on. Anyway, so starting from the bottom, the root chakra, kind of an obvious one. It's the earth element, and red, like vital energy, which is, by the way, the thing that that sort of brings in kundalini idea of bringing up that vital life force from the earth, really, the earth of the body, that electricity, that subtle electricity up to the crown chakra is one of the kundalini things. But so earth is the first chakra is like self-pres. The second one is an iteration of sexual. That's the sacral. I mean, that's where the sex organs are, right? And it's water is the element. So I'm saying in this first iteration, at least, of associating the stacking specifically with the chakra system, is that the first two are SPSX. It's going to be, at least at this first glance or run through, it's going to be the contras, right? So then the second one is sexual social. The third chakra is the solar plexus, right? That's the sun, and the element is fire, and the fourth chakra up is the heart, and that's air. And there's multiple things that make sense about this one. First of all, one being that if you then bring in my other thing of the overlaps of the stackings and instincts onto the Enneagram symbol, sexual social correlates with type 2, and you've got the heart, right? Included here. Sexual social is also, like, I have a whole Messiah schema or arc progression where sexual social represents the Messiah themselves, and that gets at this correlation of the son, and unto us is born a son, right? So that kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, like the hero is now is dawning. It's a dawn of a new day with this new Messiah and this new revelation and a new manifestation and message, that kind of thing. Okay, so then going up, the fifth chakra is the throat, and then the sixth is the third eye, and I'm associating that with social self-pres. So, and the elements there are ether and light, and I've always associated light and sunlight with social. And ether, is like the space wherein the elements do something. It's almost like the ether is almost like the finer vibration of air, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about this is it harkens to one of the cosmogonies that fascinates me is the Sumerian one. And I don't know if you know that story much. That's Tiamat and
Yes, I know a bit about it.
And Kingu and so on. Well, one aspect of the story is that, well, let's see, there's this big mess of, gods and jealousy and blah 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 blah, and chaos and wars and shit like that. And the thing that the god that ends up at the top, so to speak, and in the rightfully so in the context of what the Sumerians were sort of putting together here in this sort of religious spiritual myth, is that the god that sensibly ends up on top and ends up on top also because he won the battle is the god, and none of the other gods had this before, that he had eyes all around his head. So that's the third eye here, and he had words, the throat, and that's the throat chakra. So the superior man, the man who should be king, the woman who should be queen, is somebody that is dexterous, intelligent with their words, eloquent, blah, 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 and the person who
Right.
has long range vision, right? And can arc
Oh,
out into the future in a way that in the best interest, that a good king or queen would
right.
do or be, right? So
Okay.
in effect here, what you get is that social self-pres is, like sitting on top as a ruler. It sort of almost mimics that idea of this is who should be at the top of the pyramid as, bringing order and wisdom and
Mhm.
so forth, is the one who has vision in the abstract sense of the word and who
Mhm.
has uh, eloquence and words and a capacity with words and so forth.
Yeah, that would
So
make sense.
yeah, and then there's of course the seventh chakra, which is the crown chakra, and that's also, the top three actually, all three, throat, third eye. I mean, this is one source says it this way:
Mhm.
that the throat, third eye, and crown are all etheric. They're all, you know, ether is the main thing. So,
Mhm.
or, you know, like the third eye is etheric light, right? And the throat is, well, just ether unto itself. And then the crown is the spirit ether or something like that.
Right.
So they're like the higher, more refined vibrations of these different elements and so forth. So,
Mhm.
I've got the crown. I'm not associating an instinct with the crown. Um, and there may be one to bring there, but
I
and it could
I
it could be an integration.
I was gonna say that's
Yeah,
exactly what I
yeah,
intuited when I even thought about this for a little bit when you mentioned it, is that
yeah.
crown's probably the integration point.
Well, and also you can see from this graphic the number of leaves. The
Mm,
crown has 1,000 leaves,
hmm
and like the third eye, I can't remember what it is. It's not necessarily clear by this, but it's
hmm
actually I think I have another graphic somewhere, but it goes something like from four at the bottom at the root. That's four leaves. Then the next one I think is six at the sacral chakra, which is interesting. Which is interesting if you think of well, if you think of the number six and it being two opposing threes, so you get androgyny there. I mean, that's at the level of what I'm associating with the sexual instinct, right? Where you'd have a
Right.
masculine and feminine,
hmm
and everything is always a three, right?
hmm
Male and female, it's two threes, so you've got a six petaled
Oh, I see.
lotus, is what I
hmm
mean there. And then the next one I believe it might actually be 10 at the solar plexus. And I don't necessarily have a symbolic thing there, except to say that 10, that would be the first iteration of, what is it, exponentiating something, right?
hmm
Something to the 10th power. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
hmm
and it's the solar plexus, right? So that's tying us to a star. So that's getting into that realm of, well, and also the solar plexus is personal power,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's an exponentiating thing, right? Leveraging your own power,
hmm
that kind of idea. And then
hmm
at the heart chakra, there's 12 petals. There's a few things I could do with that, but one being that, first of all, it's a doubling of the sacral, which is at the sexual
hmm
chakra, right? And so there's something there that's uh, personal, relational, intimate, multifaceted, right? Because
hmm
it's now double sixes, and there's a thing, you might have run into it with like Jungian stuff, that all the single digit numbers are uh, pregnant with all kinds of things, right? All
Right.
kinds of symbols and so forth.
hmm
At three, there's something special about the line, so to speak, between the number three, in very abstract archetypal three going to four is a thing, and
Mhm.
three times four, that kind of thing,
Oh, I
and
see what.
and
Yeah.
there being four things multiplied by three, or that kind of thing. I mean, just like in astrology,
Yes.
you've got four cardinal signs, four
Hmm.
mutable signs, four fixed signs,
Yeah, because you have the 12 signs. Yeah,
all of
and
that.
12 is huge in a lot of
Yeah.
things, like 12 disciples, blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, and there's a good one right there. So I was associating, the solar plexus and the heart with the Messiah.
Yep.
So there's 12, right?
Yep. Hmm.
Um, and if you add those two, the petals, that's 22. And so that's another association with the number two.
Hmm.
And it's like a master, it's like a doubling
Yeah.
of two-ness, right? And
Mhm.
that's in astrology, as you know, those double numbers, you don't reduce them. You don't go two
Yes.
plus two is four, right? So it's
Hmm.
it's a doubling of it's an exponentiator, right, of the power of the two. So that again, reiterates this sexual social type two overlap
Oh,
and the
that's
Messiah.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of interesting. Okay, I think at the throat, 16 petals. And one thing that's occurring to me just in this moment, newsflash, is if the third eye and throat chakra are social self-pres, then in some sense the throat is the self-pres. And
Hmm.
and at the root chakra, the first chakra, it's four petals, and at the
Mm.
throat, it's 16. So
Hmm.
that's four times four,
Right.
right? So there's something there that's interesting. Uh,
Hmm.
the other thing about that too that comes up there is this idea of the word made flesh. So the throat
Hmm.
spoke, made the earthly things. And it brings in the third eye piece, which gets into the mind, like part of I think it's quantum physics or quantum thought in some sense,
Hmm.
that, well, on one level, when you go to the subatomic level, there's actually just space. There's actually nothing there with every single atom, right? And so everything, well, it's kind of like this, the simple way to say it is when you turn the corner uh, on your street and your house or apartment isn't in your rear view mirror anymore, you turn that
Hmm.
second street, your house actually isn't there. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it only things only exist because they're existing in our minds. And when they're
Right.
when when there's no mind to think them, they
Hmm.
are not formed up, into their existence.
Hmm. Like the Schrodinger's cat
There you
kind of
go.
theory.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Right. So anyway, that's where I was
Hmm.
going with all that. And I'll send you this thing and
Yeah.
give me some other ideas.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so much there. Even in like the one of the things that I was thinking with the like self-pres at the root connecting to the self-pres at the throat.
Yeah.
Like it's even something as simple as like when like if you're being taught how to sing, like what comes from like more of the gut area is the thing that
Oh
you
yeah.
want up
Yeah.
into the throat and how to communicate and stuff. So that's just like one tiny little
Yeah.
thing I even think of.
Well, it's also I'm thinking of stuff like what is yours the whatever colloquialism or whatever, what is your stance on this issue? Then you've got to
Mm,
you're standing on the earth, you know, and
right.
and you're saying your stance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like here's where I am. What's your
Oh, that's
position on
right.
this, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's expressing, yeah,
Where you're
your
grounded
position,
at. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm. Yeah,
mm,
there's a lot in there about that.
yeah,
This is fun.
yeah,
It's definitely different from like the thing that I was I mean, like I wouldn't say that I'm like tracking it, I guess, just when we were going through the centers, like I found it interesting to think of the chakras because they lined up a lot, like what we were discussing in the centers and like the basics of what body does, lines up really well with the first two chakras.
Okay.
And like the basic thing that the heart does lines up with that heart chakra. And, for the head to kind of have three, well, I guess the body would be the lower three, the heart is that center, and then the head is kind of
Yeah.
the
That's
upper three.
interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I had in the back of my mind just because it was overlapping really well with what we were finding. But this, it still sort of fits.
Well, yeah. So that's a good one. Like, first of all, it may make more sense to like just put, say, the first three instincts as self-pres and
Right.
the heart as, I'd say, sexual, and
Mm-hmm.
then social as the top three. Because
Mm-hmm.
because there's also, I'm thinking, of course, just literally like the word crown, like that's social,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know? So
Mm-hmm.
there is a sense there. Yeah, there's definitely something that could be done in that iteration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could play with it in a lot of different ways.
And there's also ways to play with the sin flow stackings. For example, let's say that self-pres is the root chakra and uh social and the heart is air. And so that's social. So
Mhm.
that just makes me think just sort of the, I don't know, just the animal, like the beating heart and the forepaws on the
Right.
or hooves on the
Mm-hmm.
ground, and it's got the fire and water within it. So that's the first and the fourth, and it's got the second and third, the fire and water of sexual, are sort of in that container, which is kind of self-pres social-ish in
Mm-hmm.
itself.
Mm-hmm.
And contained, you know what I mean? Like part of being an animal, associating SPSO with animal, partly from the Bob Chakra stuff, but is that animals have a mating season and then they're done with the sexual
Mm-hmm.
instinct.
Right.
Just it's contained, right? It's almost, well, in mating season, it's not sober, is the word I was going to use, but generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, their use of it, let's say, is sober, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, we do this for this short amount of time during the year, and then it's everything else is the collective, my place in it, and so forth, and my survival and uh,
Mm-hmm.
food, all that stuff. So,
All the self-pres stuff.
yeah.
I still kind of want to link them up though to the overlaps of the centers. So like the bottom three being
Yes.
sexual, the
Oh,
second being the heart being social, and then the head and the top, well, two technically being self-pres. And the way that I see that,
that's crazy. I
I
don't know
kn-
if I can endorse that.
can I convince
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Please.
Okay, in the arc of our centers journey, because I'm assuming you don't consume too much of our podcast, do you?
I'm not, I mean, I do binges where I listen to two or three.
Okay.
I haven't heard the most recent ones. One thing about all of this stuff is that all of these kinds of ideas are have layers,
Mhm.
and one basic thing about that, and it's not necessarily going to correlate to what you're about to do with them, but it might, is that I think of it, and I see this even, for example, in things like Riso's levels of development or levels of health, is that
Mhm.
everything at each layer of a given thing that you're looking at, whatever it is, like anything, it's oscillating to the opposite gender, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
Charge, right? Like
Mhm.
um, so you can expect opposites, right? So like you just kind of flipped the whole thing upside down, essentially,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
that's exactly, so that makes sense. So like I would imagine that where you're going, and because of the stuff you guys do, that you're going to the next layer deeper, or two or three layers
Yes.
deeper. Yeah, yeah,
I see. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that would make sense. Yes, I agree with that. And I think it's too like the in that realm of like um opposites and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that we find on the podcast is kind of like the feminine version of the Enneagram, like looking in the internal,
There you go.
behind the
Yeah,
eyes kind of thing. Yeah.
yep. No, exactly.
So
I'm just a man. I just no, not very deep. Yeah.
no, I
No, no,
wouldn't put it that way.
no, no, no. But I agree with you. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Um, so the way that I would like, okay, and I think it kind of overlaps more with your instincts here. Because so there's that self-pres sexual. So like there's some kind of like self-pres sexual leading into sexual social. So there's a
Right.
sexual instinct contained in these bottom three.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the social from the middle chakra, the heart chakra, leading into the social of the upper,
Yeah.
head center.
Yeah.
And then self-pres again, kind of capping it at the top. So
Yeah.
the way that I would see it, based on like the arc that I guess if I could like shrink our like give a synopsis of the centers
Right.
that we've kind of seen, like, so body center overlaps with sexual in the way that there's something about how we are perceiving our boundaries, how we're perceiving our connection, like that root connection to the earth in general, like our instincts, our core instincts in general,
Mhm.
and therefore the merging of those as well. This is where anger comes in, that anger has some kind of tension and release, this, sort of sexual type power into it as well.
And anger is fueled by libidinal energy, or
Yes.
you could say. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that libidinal energy obviously takes shape in the root, sacral, and solar plexus. Like there's
Right,
a kind of, it's the fire, it's the hearth
Yeah,
of
there
the
you go.
body, essentially. Yeah. And so in that sense, sexual taking up those three, like to put in the synopsis of what I kind of think as the journey of the instincts and through dreams is
Mm.
that sexual really contains everything.
Yes.
Like if you basically sort of like what I was talking about with John, that if you like your connection to God and goddess, which is then projected onto mother and father, which is then projected onto men and women, or
Yeah.
masculinity and femininity, which
Right.
like literally fuels your entire
Yeah.
sense of self and
Yeah, yeah.
relationship structures, right? So
Yeah.
like that's at the base, like that's the root. That is everything.
Yep. Yep.
It's gonna anything, and this is like, the story of the chakras is like, if your root chakra's fucked, all of the rest are going to be fucked
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
right?
right. Mhm,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like there, if you're unconscious to that sexual instinct, your other instincts can't update. Like that
Yeah.
one has
Yeah.
to have some kind of disillusionment to the projections of it, like mother, father, in order for social to make any sense. Like your sexual shadows are going to inform you of your social shadows, are going to inform you of your connection to your body, self-pres, and even just the way
and
of
it's-
perceiving things.
Yeah, and sexual is mercurial. It's
Yeah.
change. It's change and unexpected or surprise or whatever.
Yeah.
It's Hermes Mercury. So it's So the more that is integrated into the personality and self at all kinds of different levels, then you've got an actual facility, tools, competency, so to speak, at some
Right.
level with change work and
Yes.
not doing the
Yeah.
personality or the instincts and repeating.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's that the idea of like when you're withdrawing projections, you're making your sense of self and therefore your connection to the world more fluid, more mercurious rather than like concretized
There you go.
and stuck.
Yeah,
Um, and that can also be where like, Kundalini, the snake coiled at the bottom, awakens and actually is able to move and be
right.
fluid,
Yeah,
and connect you to the rest of those chakras up to the top, right?
yeah, yeah.
So that's where I would see sexual.
Well, I was going to say the other thing too that people aren't seeing the graphic, or maybe they are because you project it onto the world,
Mhm,
is that the colors, on the ones that which is the first three chakras that you're
mhm,
associating with sexual,
mhm.
are red, orange, yellow. So it's sort of the spectrum of the colors of fire typically.
Yes. Yeah.
And also the sun of the sun, there's even, sometimes the
Mhm.
sun is even depicted as red, right? And red just
Right.
symbolizes heat. But,
Mhm.
the sun is then more obviously kind of, there's the oranges and the yellows, and that brings in, um, well, a star. The sun is a star, and
Mhm.
all matter, and including all the molecules, cells that make up our human body originally are star stuff.
Yeah, right.
So
Mhm.
we are star dust, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that is at the root, to
Mhm.
your point, of everything, right? At
Right.
our origins. And then
Yes.
we're beings of light also at another
Mhm.
level is another aspect, and that's a function of the sun and
Mhm.
or a star. Yeah. So,
Right. And yeah, like the those first threes, like the theme of the first three too are like really embedded in the sexual instinct. Like you have root chakra, so like
yeah.
I mean, if we want to go like the basic of masculinity and femininity connected to some kind of part of this earth, like
Oh yeah.
you are grounded in soul, and in both of those there is some kind of aspect of soul to be
Hmm.
connected to, right?
Right.
And then like your sacral chakra is literally like desire.
Yeah.
So that kind of sexual instinct desire, and your solar plexus, kind of what you were saying with the Messiah, like it
Mhm.
is your sense of self and confidence and yeah, like that sort of more solar energy of
And
identity.
confidence attracts.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing too, like the root chakra, you said soul, and then of course there's solar plexus.
Yeah.
One of my other basic things that I often repeat is, the word in Spanish for the sun is SOL,
Ah,
soul.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's I would see sexual in all those
That's
three,
good.
and the body. Yeah. And then well, and to just kind of throwing into the root chakra with alongside with the body, it's like your sense of safety and at a very
Hmm.
basic level as well. And like
Yeah.
the more people are traumatized from birth, essentially, like the more likely that root chakra doesn't
Oh,
feel
interesting.
safe or connected or anything. And
Yeah,
yeah, it completely influences the way that you connect with
yeah,
other people and the way that you perceive reality and such like that.
yeah. Hmm.
So that's a baseline kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So then social overlapping the heart and
Mhm.
therefore the heart center, like social having that kind of ability to, well, like in Josh's theory, the gaze in that way. That ability to connect, like it's the giving and the receiving
Yeah.
aspect. And the heart is very universal in the sense that
There
like
you go.
you could
Yeah.
listen to someone else's song and it's speaking something to your heart because your heart is like not yours
Yes.
per se.
Right.
It's so there's a social
That's good.
there's an
That's interesting.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah, there in social there's always an aspect of an other either
Well,
gazing upon you or you are gazing upon it, that kind of thing.
well, also briefly, like in my thing of cats versus dogs, cats are SPSX and dogs are SPSO. And
Yeah.
like the thing you see with dogs just is like overwhelmingly is heart. I mean,
Yes.
there's just so much fucking heart. Just, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah.
like deluge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that like unconditional love
Yeah.
kind of
And
thing.
I think of the social instinct as not that they're one and the same at all, but as
Mhm.
the bridge to the heart.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
I
as
could
an
see that.
instinct. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
parenting is a social and
Mhm.
you know what I mean? You can see how there's the
Yeah,
heart comes in. Yeah.
and with like the heart chakra, a lot of the work that you do around that is like uh physically like lots of people have their shoulders like their posture is kind of folded in because it
Yes,
is
yes.
trying to protect the heart.
Yeah.
That to be open and to actually have your shoulders back is to be vulnerable and to have your heart exposed.
Mhm.
And so there's that kind of element of that other people can impact me and
Mhm.
I can impact other people. And so the implications of that really do impact and affect the heart in
Mhm.
general.
Mhm.
And that's a very social kind of thing.
Right.
Like there's another thing here other than me to consider.
Right.
And that's that kind of giving and receiving thing I was talking about.
Right. And
That's
there's a
really big
sort
part.
of shame response too,
Yeah.
sometimes with those
Yes.
postures where, like, which is, you know, associating it with the heart center as well
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, that slumped over or, uh, uh, almost, shoulders coming in to protect the heart,
Mm-hmm.
is like a shame response, you know, or can
Mhm.
be.
Yeah.
Some,
And
yeah.
it's definitely a shame response. And that too links to like your identity. So those two connections, that sexual social that you have mapped here of like the solar plexus and the heart, like they really influence each other
Right. Sure.
because it is that like, you know, even not considering an other person like in a social sense, but just your social personhood,
Mhm.
and how connected you are to it and how deep that connection is like definitely impacts the way that you show up in the world,
Yep.
like
Yep.
you know, your sense of self.
That's
So that's where
interesting.
I would put social there. And so the interesting thing about self-pres overlapping the head center, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
this
That
is
fits
where
with
I
my, well,
yeah, and I get a little
huh.
bit more abstract with this, but I
Okay,
feel like
yeah.
it's fitting for the
Yeah,
chakras.
but it's yeah, this is like again, this is like you're doing higher vibration
Yeah.
sort of in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. That like self-pres in the head center that I have found, other than kind of like the typical, um, like you even think of why we acquire resources in the first places because like we can perceive ahead, like we can think ahead, like I'm going to need
That's
this
interesting.
thing, blah blah
That's
blah. I'm
interesting.
going to yeah, like
Well,
I'm
and that
going
relates to Josh's thing of like you know, the object
yeah.
impermanence thing and that
Hmm.
kind of thing where you
Yes.
yes, in the
And
developmental, yeah.
I kind of forget if Josh said this to, I think he did, that the head center is also able to, or at least, yeah, I guess there's the potential to understand the concept of infinity.
Uh-huh.
Like there's,
That's interesting with
yeah,
this.
like in self-pres, it just goes on like the
Hmm.
space of like the spatial distancing, the self-preservation as in like where do I exist and what are the limits of that
Mhm.
existence, you know, can also be very like
And that fits
abstract.
with that the uppermost crown is has all the others are well below 100 petals, and
Hmm.
that one is 1,000. And to me, 1,000 just represents the everything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
like
just like
too
yeah,
much.
yeah.
So much.
It's like yeah, this is yeah, infinity. in a
Yes,
way
yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in that sense, like it is the ability to like self-preservation can also again sort of overlap, and this is where I'm going it supports your theory. Like it kind of goes back into the root, like goes back into
Oh
that
yeah.
self-pres
Yeah.
sexual
That's good.
because it's like
Right.
where are like I can actually perceive where my boundaries are and where the limits of those are. And a lot of the work that you're even doing in general with dream work is trying to understand like what is actually a threat and what is just the
Okay.
perceived
Yes. Yes.
threat.
Yes. That's
So it's
interesting.
like that's the kind of like third eye sort of thing of
Yeah.
like what am I actually
Hmm.
what kind of reality am I actually engaging with right now? Is it
Yeah.
the kind that has been severely fucked up from the root of this whole
Mhm.
thing, or is it
Mm.
actual
Nice. Yeah.
reality? And can it go beyond? Like that's where too, like the levels that you start to then engage with in this self-pres sort of machine dashboard sort of way. Like we just finished up with the dream symbols, and one of the things that I mentioned that kind of overlap with self-pres is like uh it's machines, dashboards, stuff like that, because you're constantly trying to gauge certain levels of things like
Sure. Sure.
um
Hmm.
and you can only do that through your mind's ability, like your mind's perception.
Hmm.
And also what's interesting, kind of linking to the crown and this idea of spirit, that like
Mm.
guardian angels or spirits or things that are beyond our like limitations of reality were known to be as like machines. Like an
Oh, okay.
angel is
Yeah.
a machine because it has one purpose. And so
Yeah.
there's this spirit, this vision that you're talking about in the third
Hmm.
eye and the
Yeah.
throat
Yeah.
chakra. There's some
Hmm.
kind of vision.
Yeah.
Like your spirit essentially has like one vision. It has like a
That. Yeah.
purpose,
Yeah.
you know?
Interesting.
And so it's like kind of being able to connect, you know, beyond the head, which is what the crown chakra
Oh,
allows you to
sure.
do,
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
this sort of vision that's not just about you, it's about some other
Yeah. It's
realm.
intuition that has a non-locality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
One thing too, jumping in is going with the lower three as sexual instinct is the sacral. Well, first of all, kundalini is about bringing that sexual energy from there, starting
Hmm.
there, right?
Yeah.
That is it is sexual libidinal energy. So that's another corroboration for what you're doing here. But also the the second chakra, which is at the genitals, and it's called the sacral. Well, there's an association there with the word sacred, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's like uh uh well, I don't know, one way to say it, the sacred duty, so to speak, to bring that energy up, uh that kundalini up into all the way to the top and have it animate the whole self and the whole
Hmm.
awareness and light up the whole switchboard and well, it's sort of a training it, so to speak, in to go through a um well, like a wire, right? You're bringing it up through, abstractly speaking, you're giving it direction. You're giving
Yeah.
sexual libidinal energy a directionality as opposed to splashing it everywhere non-discriminately, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Spraying it, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Getting pissed and pissing everywhere and spraying it. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's, I mean, even if you look at it in that kind of opposite as well, that like the root and sexual is kind of that soul energy,
yeah.
and the top is the spirit, and our, you know, every kind of duality and all sorts of spiritualities and Jungian thought and blah 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 is that uh the soul and the spirit being linked together in that way, like matter and spirit, the
Yep.
masculine and feminine, like there's a balance between those things.
Yep.
And so it's just like, yeah, if the system from the bottom's fucked, then there is
Yeah.
no spirit. There's no
Also,
light in the body.
yeah, yeah. Also, in practice of alchemy, the first uh, material that you're working with, or one of them, one of the primary ones that they use, I think you can start with different things, right? Different
Mhm.
base materials to transform into, and transforming base metals is typically how it goes, which is often symbolic into gold, things like lead or copper into gold.
Yeah.
The first material is often forget what it's called, um, but it's urine actually
Oh,
that
really?
petrifies when you let
Mm.
urine sit. I mean, it's just disgusting thought, but when you let urine sit and condense it, it becomes a dark, well, almost like a clayish material, and
Mm-hmm.
it's essentially almost pure nitrogen, and
Whoa.
nitrogen is highly flammable, right? And so this is another one of
Oh.
the associations why fire and the sexual instincts is because urine comes from the genitalia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so urine, so nitrogen, when you reduce urine to nitrogen, that's a fire, right? So again, it's a fiery water coming from the genitals,
Oh,
right?
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so then to your point about, you know, having your shit together at the bottom three, which
Yeah.
is also what's at the bottom three, is
Mm-hmm.
it's almost a symbol of concentrated, purified, actually,
Mm-hmm.
libidinal energy, right?
Mm.
That can then
Mm-hmm.
be transformed into gold. And, gold then takes me, one thing that takes me to in all of this symbolism with the chakras is the crown. The
Mm-hmm.
crown is often gold, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it is, so there's a run through the sort of alchemical processes. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I think there might even be seven
Yes, there
states of
is.
matter of the alchemical processes.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
7
yeah.
stages. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, the stages. That's it. Yeah.
And I could definitely see like what's interesting too, I kind of forgot about when we were doing body center stuff. I was simultaneously listening to James Hillman talk about alchemy,
Okay.
and he would talk about like the alchemists would use the term body, not as in like a physical sense, but
Oh
as
yeah.
in
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
container that alchemy is being conducted in,
Hmm.
and the body of a certain material of some kind.
That's
So in that
interesting.
sense, yeah, like the even in this image that you have, like the body itself is the container for the
Yeah.
alchemical
Yeah.
process.
And
Definitely.
it makes me think of just terms, just like a body of work. It's a,
Yeah. Yep.
it's a whole, it's a container. Like you wouldn't, well, everything needs a form, a container for anything to be conveyed, right?
Right.
Or for a process to
Hmm.
uh, transmute from.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why like a lot of the stuff that we talk about in the pot, like I guess the whole journey through more of the internal process of Enneagram that we've discovered with, through dreams and kind of going through the centers and the instincts and stuff is that like uh understanding where your sense of self really comes from. Like how strong is that container? Because
Mhm.
oftentimes it's not strong at all, and that's why you can get triggered and impacted by so many different things because it's like what's the I that is even interacting in the world, and like what is our sense of that and stuff like that. So it's
Right.
kind of strengthening and understanding the container and being able to like uh undergo those alchemical processes without them
Mhm.
like turning to mush, or
Right. Right.
without it breaking the container, like, a controlled process,
Mhm.
essentially.
I'm also thinking of just another correlation. Just one of the things I've jokingly said about social blinds, uh, it shows up in photographs and just in general, is that there's a quality. I mean, I guess I'm almost more specifically even talking about how you see it in photographs, but that it looks like they're a dead person. There's not
Yeah.
their eyes aren't switched. The lights aren't switched on at their eyes or something.
Right.
Right? There's a
Mhm.
dead, and so if per your schema and the heart, well,
Mhm.
beating heart, that's the is it alive or is it dead?
Ah,
Right? That
right. Yeah.
so so there's no beating heart. Okay, it's they are dead.
All social blinds are dead people.
Right. Well, it's interesting too. That's taking me also to vampire stuff. Of course, the whole vampire thing has all kinds of social blind
Oh,
implications,
yeah.
allergic to the sun and all that. But then it's like we were talking about shadow sexual relative to like self-pres social and so forth. Well,
Yeah.
that's the vampire is shadow social, right? Where you're you're when you're a vampire, you're totally objectifying your prey,
Mm-hmm.
and they are just a source of blood, which
Mm-hmm.
is of course pumped by the heart, and
Mm-hmm.
so uh, yeah, it's like well, just another iteration or expression of that we have all three instincts, and they're going to try to do something
Yeah.
somehow, even that last one,
They're
right?
trying to get their needs met in some way. It's
Yeah,
just typically like a shadowy
yeah.
through the back door kind of way.
Right, right. And like the vampire thing, well, just that act, especially of biting into someone's neck and sucking their blood, it's just very non-communicative,
Yep.
right? So not social, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
well, it's uh just hyper objectifying, hyper depersonhooding, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's skipping, the person, like recognizing this as a person, they just become a
yeah,
resource to kind of
totally.
merge with,
Yeah, yeah,
in a weird puncturing kind of
yeah,
way.
yeah. Which everyone loves. That's
Of
why the vampire.
course.
Yeah.
They're obsessed with them. They need it's the draw to the instinctual urge
Well,
and
because yeah,
disregarding social.
the it's because the culture um isn't honoring the social blind thing in a way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
could say, and so that's why that vampire thing comes back because there is, it's a quote unquote wrong iteration on one level, but you kind of have to
Yeah.
start at the wrong one because you're going to start there because
Yeah.
it is immature, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you are, um, well, if the culture, I'll stay at the cultural level, if the culture isn't incorporating the social blind um, attitude and modalities or whatever, and doesn't have a healthy expression of it, then it is
Right.
going to be regressed, right?
Mm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it's going to come out in shadow,
Mm-hmm.
shadow iterations,
Yeah.
stories. Yeah,
Even in shadow though, too, there is kind of like a weird healing energy. Like at
totally.
least in vampires, there is transformation.
Yeah,
Like you don't fully die. Like it's like when I was saying the
yeah,
slaying of the dragon kind of thing. At least it's like there's a turning point.
yes,
There is something else you turn into instead of just murder.
that's true. Yeah, and that's what keeps me going.
Is the
Yeah.
vampiric urge.
Well, yeah, well, and also the justification, that
Yeah.
it's not murder. That
Yeah, definitely.
I've helped these people to live forever and to stay young forever. I mean, what more do you
Yeah,
want?
I know. Yeah.
It's a
See the
favor.
horrors of the earth until the very end.
Yeah.
To live in hell until the
until
very
the
end.
sun blots out and disappears in a billion years.
Which is what you would want anyway, because you hate the sun. So
Oh, it's
that's the end goal.
That's that should be the goal of humanity.
That's funny. Well, yeah, I get it. I like it.
No, this is good. This is
Yeah.
really good what you've done. Yeah,
I like the thing that I love about this too, and one of the things I continue to sort of push and mentioned in the thing with John is like that all three instincts, like we are just saying, are happening at once. And like they all kind of need to be updated, quote unquote, together. Like you can't just isolate one and only work on one
yeah.
and like have that one just excel while the
Sure.
other two just
Well,
sit there, you know?
And that gets to the idea, that's another kind of way to say the idea of the three instincts within each of the three instincts. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
I mean, part of the way I was conceptualizing it, just in a simple abstraction, was just that, you know, it was on my videos, that the social within sexual and the self-pres within sexual, those zones or whatever are sort of the hole or the portal through which they mix. And, you know, I imagine them mixing as partly as literal chemicals that drive each of the instincts, or kinds of brain chemicals that push the instincts. But anyway, point being, there's a, you know, it's kind of like in the yin yang symbol where there's the opposite, there's a dot of the opposite there. So there's a way for it to get in and merge.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.